Resident Evil 2 is out in just a few weeks, and just like everybody else, we're really excited to get our hands on it. Today on gameranx, here are 10 things you need to know about Resident Evil 2. Starting off at number 10, 2016's Resident Evil 7 was a real breath of fresh air for the survival horror genre, let alone Resident Evil as a series, and a big part of what made that game so great was the first-person perspective and the VR implementation. So when the Resident Evil 2 remake was announced, there was plenty of speculation over whether or not there would be a VR mode. It didn't take long, however, for those hopes to be dashed. In an interview with the UK newspaper The Daily Star, producers Yoshiaki Hirabayashi and Tsuyoshi Kanda had this to say. "We're not thinking about VR support currently, given that the camera perspective and the over-the-shoulder choice would mean that VR is not the best way to present the game. VR doesn't match the vision for us." In the same interview, Kanda joked about the perspective of the release trailer may have influenced some fans' hopes inadvertently. He said, "Thinking about it, maybe giving you the rat's eye view in the trailer may have given people the wrong idea. But if you think there's a rat VR coming, that's not the case," he joked in the same interview. So there you have it, no VR this time around. That said, we still have no idea what the future Resident Evil holds in the next true sequel, but for the time being, the classic over-the-shoulder perspective is what we've got in the Resident Evil 2 remake. Moving on to number 9, besides the game looking obviously new and very pretty, one of the biggest changes to the game is easy to notice just by looking at it, and that's the camera angle. Capcom is ditching the fixed camera angles from the OG game, and they're instead going with the over-the-shoulder camera angle that we saw for the first time in Resident Evil 4. This wasn't something I was totally expecting, if I'm being perfectly honest. I was expecting more of what we got from the GameCube Resident Evil remake, where mostly everything was kept the same and the game just got a visual upgrade, but hey, I'm totally fine with this, seeing that the old Resident Evil games don't really control that well, and it's also going to make the game feel more like a brand new game instead of just a remake. While the camera angle is definitely one of the biggest changes made to the game, there are some smaller changes too, which leads us to our next point. Coming in at number 8, while Resident Evil 2 is a remake of the original game, it's not a one-to-one remake. There are a lot of little things that were added and changed. For one, a lot of the rooms have been redesigned to fit the new camera angle and gameplay. Seeing that it doesn't use the fixed camera angles anymore, there definitely has to be some changes made so the game doesn't feel dumb. When we got our hands on a demo of it at E3, we noticed layouts were different, enemies didn't always appear in the classic locations we expected them to, and encounters with characters happened in different situations and scenarios. According to brand manager Mike Lunn, it won't be a faithful one-to-one. For the people that have even played it 1,000 times, we want it to feel fresh. That's why we don't call it Resident Evil 2 Remake. It's a new game built on top of the foundation. So there you have it. Even if you've played a shit ton of Resident Evil 2, this remake is still going to have enough changes and new stuff in it to make it feel like a fresh experience. And moving on to number 7, there are also going to be brand new areas being added as well. So far, the only one we really know about is the orphanage. We really don't know much about it at all, other than the fact that it exists and that you're going to be playing as Sherry Birkin, who's trying to escape the orphanage. It's really nice to see the dev team really try to make this as fresh as an experience as they can without changing too much. I mean, take a look at Lisa Trevor in the Resident Evil remake. She wasn't in the OG game and was added in the remake, and her little creepy cabin, her popping up, and her narrative were all really cool. And she was a pretty major plot point too. So adding things has been done before with Resident Evil remakes, and it's worked pretty well. Coming in at number 6, do you remember the daggers from the Resident Evil remake? Not the combat knife, but the letter opener looking dagger things? Well, it's making a return to Resident Evil 2. So the way it works, if you don't remember, is if you have a dagger in your inventory and you get grabbed by a zombie, you stab them and push them away, avoiding damage. And here it works the same way. You can retrieve it from a zombie after using it too, so you can use it again, although using it multiple times will damage it and will cause it to break eventually. And you can also carry more than one, and you'll be able to find them throughout the game. You can also find wooden boards lying around that you can use to board up windows to keep enemies from getting through. Next up at number 5, it's worth noting that the Resident Evil 2 remake won't have a set difficulty option to choose from when you start the game. Instead, the game will feature an adaptive difficulty system similar to what was implemented in Resident Evil 4. In an interview with VG247, Resident Evil 2 remake producer said the following: "In terms of the standard difficulty, it does adjust based on player performance. I'd like to believe that you were doing really well, and so the difficulty ramped up even more. But we have it tuned so that no matter how well you're doing, there's always going to be that sense of dread and tension there. Also, we are definitely implementing things that assist a player if they choose to utilize that stuff, such as autosave. If a player thinks, here, I'd rather have an easier time going through this, we will have those sorts of options as well. It's just another way that Capcom seems to be modernizing a now 20-year-old game, and while we're sure it won't make everyone happy, it's nice to see the developers really putting in the work to modernize this classic. Moving on to number 4, just like the original Resident Evil 2 release, both Leon and Claire are playable, but this time it works a little different. Each character will have their own unique campaign. The zapping system from the OG game won't be making an appearance here. So the whole scenario thing and doing certain things in one campaign and affecting something in the other campaign is gone. According to the game's producer, this was done in order to avoid any sort of repetition, so both campaigns will be different. Each will show a different point of view of what's going down in Raccoon City and will instead be more straightforward. That same producer had this to say: I think players today, they want these sort of deep, intense experiences with the story, and by stretching it across 4 scenarios, the story gets spread a little thin and create a sense of repetition by going through the same game multiple times to see everything. So for that reason, we went with 2 campaigns that still show all the events of each character's story, rather than having it all split up. I mean, yeah, he isn't wrong, but I think that replaying Resident Evil multiple times has always been like part of the Resident Evil package. When Resident Evil 7 came out, I had beaten it multiple times in the release week just to unlock every item, and I did the same thing in every entry in the series before that as well. I get that narrative-wise, replaying it to get the whole story might suck for some, so in that case, I totally get it, and I think it was a smart move. Next up, on number 3, this is something I didn't even think about until hearing about it, and after hearing about it, I'm really hyped. The 4th Survivor and Tofu modes are included in the game. For those that don't know, these are 2 alternate modes that you could unlock after beating both campaigns in the original release. First, there was Tofu mode, where you play it as a literal big piece of tofu and you only had a knife, and then there was 4th Survivor mode, where you play as Hunk, you know, the cool dude with the gas mask. What's cool is that Hunk's mode actually is canon. He leads a team that gets taken out by Birkin, and Hunk is able to get his hands on that G-Virus sample and has to escape Raccoon City with it. It was confirmed that both modes will be in the game, and I don't know, man, I just think it's awesome because honestly, I never thought we were going to get these 2 modes. They really didn't have to do that, but they did, and here we are, and I'm excited. Moving on to number 2, Resident Evil 2 will be launching with PS4 Pro and Xbox One X enhancements. You have the choice of cinematic and performance mode. Cinematic mode, the game will be running at 4K with 30 frames per second, and then performance mode will run at a lower resolution with 60 frames per second. Back in August, it was also announced that Resident Evil 2 will also support NVIDIA's new RTX tech on PC, but there really isn't much information out there about what exactly it's going to be doing, or if it's going to be available at launch. Finally, at number 1, we have some housekeeping we want to get out of the way. Resident Evil 2 launches on PS4, Xbox One, and PC on January 25th. As with every other video game release, there are multiple editions of Resident Evil 2. Of course, there's a standard edition. Then there's the deluxe edition that comes with some character and weapon skins. One of those skins being an Elza Walker skin for Claire, which is really cool because that was the original playable character before they scrapped the game and went with Claire Redfield. Then there's the GameStop exclusive collector's edition that has the skins from the deluxe edition, plus a 12-inch Leon Kennedy statue, an art book, a copy of the soundtrack, and other small physical goods. Those are 10 things you need to know about Resident Evil 2, but we want to hear from you, so meet us down in the comments and let us know what you think. Which of the 2 campaigns do you plan on playing through first, and how do you feel about those other 2 modes being added in? As I'm sure you already know, hitting that like button really helps us out, and if you're new here for some reason, subscribing is a good idea because we put up videos like this every single day. As always, thank you for stopping by to hang out with us. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.